that I have as far as practicing medicine is talking to some of my patients about their younger years and so forth. Franklin Wilbourn has always got a tale he can tell you. He just mention one word, give him a key, and he's got a tale to tell you about Paragould, or when he was growing up. This became so interesting to me that I asked him if he would come tonight and talk to us about early Paragould. Mr. Wilbourn grew up here. I think he moved here as a young boy, and still has a fantastic memory of all of those little things that, matter of fact, there's some of the things I don't think he'll tell us tonight that he told me, and Joey has already confirmed that statute of limitations prevents the law from coming in here and getting after either one of them. But not to take any of his time, here's Franklin Wilbourn.
Issue of the Paragould Soliphone, which has some interesting pictures and also some news things. I have here Dorothy Owens' father put out in 1918 all the businesses that were in Paragould at that time. And also I have enjoyed this. There's some names that are left out. And I don't know why, it's because they're criminal record or why, but some of us are entered. I'm a member of a large family, and our father moved the family here in the 1st of January 1912. A short time after we moved here, there was a 2-story house where the city light plant office is now. Some of you know it as a Stedman home. And now we lived there for a little over a year, 1912 to part of 1913, till my dad bought Dr. Owens' home on Poplar Street. The Dixon Memorial Hospital was right across the street, and also the courthouse, and where there's a vacant lot now that one time was a food locker and Masonic Hall. There was a parish business college, and they had a basketball team and they had a football team. And incidentally, at that time we had 3 football teams in Paragould. We had a high school team, and a parish business college team, and a town team. Some of the men that played on it was Bernie Harrington, Ambus Harden, Bradley Scott, and I think there's some pictures around in town of it. But the thing of it is, some of those men played on all 3 teams. And I became a football nut. I don't think I missed one. Now, we also had baseball way down in the south part of town, which was known as Oklahoma. And I've heard several different stories about that, but anybody that lived down around the Baldwin School area, they lived in Oklahoma. That was where you said so-and-so, they lived in Oklahoma. Now, most of you know Paragould started as a railroad town. The 2 railroads crossed here. The name Paragould is from 2 men. I know most of you know that. But we used to have trains every hour, seemed like, through here. The Missouri Pacific had several passenger trains. The Cotton Belt had trains. We had the train that went to Blytheville twice a day, and it was called the Bull Moose. Now that is a long story in itself. And they called the Iron Mountain, they called it the Dinky and the Limb Dodger, and I don't know, the Cotton Belt was one of the original, their passenger train, was one of the original slow trains through Arkansas. But then that's all changed now. And I was over that way the other day. They're tearing up the switch rails over there now. Of course, that's all past history now. The things that I see changes in Paragould. The slogan, I think, was started by Ms. Bell Wall, was "You like Paragould." And I'm sorry they got away from that. Because I think most people that are here because they like Paragould. And, of course, this friendly city, that's fine. But at the same time, we had the slogan, and most towns are known. We're having some terrible things happening right now. I think anybody from now and the next few years, somebody say something about Russell, say, oh yes, that's where that terrible tragedy happened. Well, now, we had our share of criminals and scallywags and I don't know what all here, but we also had some good people here. And I'd rather remember them. Ms. Bellwall, Ms. Skeggs, Mr. and Ms. Kirsch, and I could go on. Maybe I've left some of them that you all think are more important. I've left out. But we had, Mr. Partlow was a schoolman here, the mayor's grandfather. And I like to remember, Dr. Grizzard was a very important man here. But, of course, we had all the different men that were in business here. The Lin Family, Mr. Hasty, and Bill Herget's father, and all of them, they came here with the old pekin mill. Now, there didn't used to be where the overhead crossing, I mean, where we've got this overpass now for the railroad. There didn't even used to be a crossing there. Junction Street stopped there. All that pekin mill went all down through there. Of course, that's all past. We had a flour mill here that was very famous at one time. But that has gone before our family moved here. But I heard lots about it. In fact, one of those switches that the railroads turned up was known as the flour mill switch. It run up past the old utilities building and on up to the building where my brother runs a wholesale house now. And that's all things past. My age group came along with the automobile, the radio, the airplane, things that, and of course, TV, that didn't come along almost until we had grandchildren. And there's things that we take for granted now that we went to the other ways for entertainment when we were growing up. I said I wasn't going to say. Back to our family, a family of 8 children and a whole lot of relatives and cousins. We did have some stories, I mean. And one of our grandsons wants to write a book. And so when his book comes out, there's going to be some of those stories in there about the Wilbourn family and some of our other connections and all. I touched on one subject when Kitty Sloan talked with me. I knew both. I was pretty good size when our grandmothers lived. I knew one of my grandfathers, but he was a Civil War veteran. He was a doctor, and he was very stern. I didn't ask him too many questions. I'm sorry that I didn't. But anyhow, I did ask the grandmothers. And what we feel now with an ailment that's scaring the country and the atom bomb and all the nuclear business. Now, my grandparents, my 2 grandmothers, they were both afraid of earthquakes and yellow fever and things like that, you see. They went through the Civil War and went through a whole lot of things that I'm sure some of your people here have heard your parents and grandparents talk about. But they were so scared. Now, one of my grandmothers didn't live too far. She grew up right close to that earthquake over the 1811, 1812 over in Tennessee. And all the time she had grown up. In fact, I think what I can remember, that her father moved the family over here to Arkansas, to Harrisburg, to get away from that area. They were so scared of another earthquake. They were still had that in mind, you know, where which we've all heard about. And we get a scare once in a while now. And of course, the idea of a disease, a contagious disease that is just spreading. Now, my grandmother Wilbourn lived in North Mississippi, not very far from Memphis, and she told at different times about they died so fast over there in Memphis from yellow fever in 1875, I believe it was, somewhere along there, that they couldn't bury them. They just had to wait, you know. And that was, of course, in their generation, was what they were scared of. And we have the same thing now. When we want to brood on it, they'll drive you nuts, just to use a common expression, if we let it get you down. But things, their conditions can improve, and we just hope that ours improve. Talking about transportation, one of our grandsons, when he was a teenager, he's a smart-aleck college student now, working on extra degrees and all that sort of thing that I didn't have a chance to do. But anyhow, we were talking about making trips to Memphis. He said, "Well, Paul, did you ever go in a covered wagon or a stagecoach?" That's, you know, he had seen TV and movies, and of course now some of you see some of the old movies and see some of the things that our generation, people my age, experienced. And of course we talked about the good old days. There was no such thing. And they said, when you really enjoy life when you grow old. Well, I'm enjoying life to a certain extent, but it ain't no fun to be old. Now, I have this. If any of you all want to examine these, I'm happy to have them here. And I thank you very much for listening to me. If you want to ask any questions, too personal now. Francis Glenn, I know enough to hang you.
I just want to be, I can read this. No, I wanted to ask you, were you the Jersey Wilbourn?
Yes.
Or where did the Jersey come from?
Every family had a cow. And we pastured our cow where the Harmon Field is now, and all this area north of Hunt Street. That belonged to well, I think some of the land belonged to Mr. McDonald, Tony Hale McDonald's grandfather. And of course this was my job to take that cow back and forth all the time. And then they'd say, well, here comes Franklin and his Jersey, and then finally they just said, here comes Jersey.
Yeah, I think.
Now Francis tells me that he can remember that they drove cattle through town here, and a lot of Paragould at one time was one of the biggest cattle shipping centers, and they had those stockyards right along on Bradford Street there, and then over on where the gas company is now. And they used to drive the cattle right through town. Sometimes we get 50 cents or a quarter to go along and help them keep them out of the yards. And I told my wife the other day, I said, I can just see some of the women on Court Street out there with their aprons and the things trying to keep the cattle out of their yards, you know. But there was a lot of them that shipped out here. At one time, I think Mr. Purcell, John Purcell's grandfather, was one of the biggest shippers. He'd ship 5-6 carloads at a time.
Start down at Main Street or Junction Street, somewhere down there, and work north on Pruitt. And tell us what your earliest memories are.
Well, there was dirt and there was some mud holes. and they sold cotton during the cotton in the fall. They brought the cotton wagons there between Burdick's and Joseph's store, which is now Belts and the 3-story building. I refer to it as Burdick's. My children call it Gravers. And some people don't know who you're talking about when you say both of them. But they were 2 large department stores for a long time. And the buyers would come there, and they would bring the wagons down there, and they'd climb up on the wagons. They're supposed to shove each other off a time or two. But anyhow, that's the way this was. Of course, they had the gins going here, you know. They had, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe 6 gins here, cotton gins here at one time. Now I think we just have the one.
What other business was along Fred Street?
Well, there's none of the businesses except Trice's. Trice's is the only business that's still there. Originally, we had the Meriwether's Hardware and the Stedman Hardware, and had all the different grocery stores and meat markets, and different, mostly ready-to-wear stores and barber shops and so on. They were all on Fred Street. And I had a man here the other day said he hadn't been down in Paragould in 20 years. And he sure was glad to see some stores still down there. And I know some of the rest of them are too.
What was this outer city limits in 1912 when you moved here?
Oh, 14th Street. And where the hospital was called Gypsy Hill. And it wasn't too much below it.
Where was the red schoolhouse? They called it the old red schoolhouse.
Well, now, I don't know what they meant, the red schoolhouse, the one that burned in 1917 or 1917, was where the middle school was, and that was an awful big school.
Well, was there a school down in the south where Baldwin is?
Yes, ma'am, they called it the South School, but Mr. Baldwin was the head of the Missouri Pacific, and they had all the shops here at that time, and had all the people working, trainmen and all working here, and he was a very popular man. I don't know whether Missouri Pacific did anything to that or not, but they named the school after Mr. Baldwin, who was the head of the Missouri Pacific Railroad.
Why did they call that Hillball?
Some of them said, now, there may be different stories, that part of town was opened up about the time that the state of Oklahoma was made a state. It went from a territory to a state.
Well, I know, I live on Wirt Street.
Yeah.
My neighbor says that is one of the oldest streets. And she moved out there, I think, in the 40s or 30s. Late, or about the middle 30s, I guess. They were the first house there. She said when she married her husband, they lived on Lake Street, right in town. But when he moved her to Wirt Street, that she cried for about 3 weeks because he took her away from Paragould. That's how far it was. Now, we're still, that's city out there, but.
Well, now, they had the baseball parks, they were one of the first baseball parks down there. And I won't say anything about beards, because that's something that's is a debatable question. But they had the House of David here one time, with all their beards and whiskers. But that wasn't the highlight of it. The next week they had the Bloomer Girls.
Back then, did they have oversupply barbershops?
Oh, they had barbershops. Oh, yes.
Several each block.
Oh, they had lots of barbershops.
Mr. Wilbourn, you were in the wholesale supply business. Do you recall the Lin grocery store?
Oh, yes.
When did that, do you remember when that started?
They must have gone out along in the early 30s. Andy Lin had the store, and he had his son Shelley with him, and Bob, and then their son-in-law James Taylor had a store there, and then he started a mill where the library was for a while, over on Poplar Street, right across from the Chamber of Commerce. Yes, I remember the Lin family.
My aunt married one of the boys, but I knew her in-law had that store on foot.
That was Mr. Andy Lin.
Yeah.
And to tell you a little story about him, that he hated to lose the first customer on Monday morning. And if you caught him in the back of the store, he kept on talking with him, he'd almost give it to you before he'd let you get out of the front door to make a sale. He thought he was superstitious. If he missed that first sale Monday morning, he was going to have a bad week. But that's, of course, just one of the stories that come along with that.
Back to Depot Street is Lake Street.
That's Lake Street.
Was the depot, tell us a story about it. I don't
Well,
guess
now that was out of
there.
business, but there was, where the water plant was there, on the corner there, on Lake Street, where that jog is, there was originally a depot there. And I understood that that's where the old PSE used to come into. My wife's father worked for the PSC when he first came to Paragould. He came here as a railroad man. So did Mr. Woosley, who was with the Bank of Commerce. And then later on, they were in the banking business. But that the PSC was supposed to run up there. It wasn't, see, the Cotton Belt didn't take the PSC over until about 1917, 16, 17, something like that. And that was Depot Street, and the sign stayed there for a long time, Francis. You could see it. And people would be confused, you know, oh, this is Lake Street. But they had Depot Street sign there.
Well, I've heard, and I don't know where I heard this, that that's where Jay Gould put the Missouri Pacific depot, and they wouldn't use it. Whether that's true or not,
Well,
I don't know where I heard that.
Well, I don't see. They were using the same depot when the Roundhouse did. And I, of course, worked for the railroad one summer during high school, and of course, I learned a lot of the railroad jargon. And I think it was after World War II when they began to put the radios on the trains, and when the trainmen used to use walkie-talkies. Before that, they did all kinds of signals, you know, they did all like this, that, and I see a railroad person here that's smiling, and I don't know exactly just when they changed all that. I guess about the time they began to change over from steam to diesel. But now, I tell you, a train, did you ever ride the Hoodlum, Francis? You never did ride the Hoodlum? I don't know whether Joey rode the Hoodlum. That was a train that they pushed up from the Roundhouse, which is down below where Riggs is now. And they pushed, they had these old cabooses in there with benches in them, and they brought it up to town here 2 or 3 times every 24 hours and took the workmen back down there to work at the Roundhouse. How many of you know what a Roundhouse is? Oh, lots of you. Didn't catch you there, did I? But we used to, Mr. Brittingham used to take a bunch of us down there. Well, that was before when we started the Boy Scouts. He'd take a bunch of us and we'd ride the Hoodlum, you know, go down there.
You told me about the signs that were on the depot that we had certain restrictions here in Greene County about race.
No, there wasn't any joke about that. They had a sign, no Negroes allowed. But they took it down a long time ago and then put up an electric sign, you like Paragould.
Well, I've heard that story before about how when blacks came through on the passenger train, they wouldn't dare get off at Paragould, so they had a sign up there telling them not to get off.
I'll tell you something else, Doc. We had a law against cigarettes. We called them tailor-mades in Arkansas. And the news butchers, we call news butchers, these boys on the train that sold fruit and gum and candy and so on. They sold cigarettes and cigars. And I wasn't old enough, but some of the older boys would go on the train and buy their cigarettes from the news butcher. You couldn't buy them here in town unless they were bootlegged. But I think that went out somewhere around 1980.
You mentioned too a while ago where they played baseball down around Baldwin. Where did the football teams play?
All over town. We played right here. We played right here when I was in high school. And most of the games earlier were played the middle school, what the red school as you talked about. They had a great big field there between there and the McKinney property. And they played their games there. And then we played on where Woodrow Wilson is. We played on that, rocks and all. Then they finally built a place down here. And I think in 22 and 23 we played here, right, which was part of the old brickyard property. Then later on, when this Pekin Mill pulled out, they played down there across from, about where the overhead bridge is, just below there. But then one year we played at the fair, 2 years we played at the old fairground. 1 year we played at the circus grounds, which is off of 8th Street down there in 4th Brunswick. 4th and 8th. It's known as a circus, they still call it circus grounds.
Actually, you were talking about playing football up at the Red School. Well, that's where I started, and there's another young lady in this room that started the same day I did, 1920. Well, I'm not calling them names. We started there. There were 2 little red buildings there. Were they built after the fire?
Oh, yes.
We went there the first semester of first grade, and then went to the Methodist Church.
Well, they moved, those buildings were put up